At the party, I found my son bleeding. My sister smirked. He needs to toughen up. I struck her face and left. Next day, my mother begged, please, don't ruin her life. Ben, I am 36 years old, and my name is Diana. If you were to look at my life from the outside, you would probably just see a tired accountant, a single mother living in a cramped, two-bedroom apartment right in the noisy heart of Minnesota. The digital clock on my microwave often flashes 3 in the morning while I am still hunched over my battered laptop, my eyes burning from the harsh blue light of endless spreadsheets. Every single keystroke, every column balanced, is another few dollars added to the jar. It is an exhausting, relentless cycle, but I do not have the luxury of giving up. My ex-husband, Derek, is a software developer who decided after our divorce that the West Coast was calling his name. He packed up his life, moved across the country, and left me to juggle parenthood, a demanding low-paying job, and a mountain of responsibilities all by myself. But every late night, every skipped meal, and every moment of crushing fatigue melts away the second I hear the soft padding of my 9-year-old son's feet against the cheap linoleum floor of our hallway. Felix is my entire universe. He is a quiet, deeply observant boy who inherited my cautious nature, but he possesses a pure, untainted joy that I lost a long time ago. His absolute greatest passion in life, his sanctuary from our chaotic world, is his baseball card collection. It started when he was 6 years old with a simple, cheap pack from the corner store, but it has grown into an obsession. He does not just collect them, he treats them like sacred artifacts. I remember the exact afternoon we bought his most prized possession. We had saved up our loose change for 3 months in a large glass jar on the kitchen counter. When we finally hit $25, I took him to the dusty local card shop downtown. He spent an hour carefully inspecting the glass display cases before selecting a rare rookie card. The sheer reverence in his hands as he held that piece of cardboard brought tears to my eyes. He meticulously placed it into a heavy-duty plastic sleeve and then tucked it into the front page of his large, blue binder. Mom, he had whispered to me that day, his eyes wide with wonder, this is my ticket to the big leagues. That binder goes everywhere with him. He spends hours sitting cross-legged on the worn living room rug, gently turning the pages, memorizing player statistics, and arranging them by team and year. It is his small joy, his anchor in a childhood that has been defined by his father's absence and his mother's constant struggle to keep the lights on. I would do absolutely anything to protect that joy. I would work 100 more nights without sleep just to keep that innocent smile on his face. But the hardest part of being a mother is accepting that you cannot protect your child from everything, especially the toxicity that flows through your own bloodline. To understand why my life looks the way it does, you have to look back 19 years. I was 17 years old, an anxious but fiercely determined high school senior. My parents, Gloria and Walter, lived in a sprawling, beautiful home in the affluent suburbs. But living in a nice house does not mean you have a good home. For as long as I can remember, I was the invisible daughter. My younger sister, Monica, who is 3 years younger than me, was the undisputed golden child. Whatever Monica wanted, Monica got. If she wanted a new designer dress, my father pulled out his credit card. If she threw a tantrum because I got a slightly bigger piece of cake, my mother would take my plate away and give it to her. I learned early on that my worth in that family was non-existent. So, I buried myself in books. I joined the debate team, I stayed up late studying, and I poured every ounce of my soul into academics. My ticket out of that suffocating house was a full-ride scholarship to a prestigious university. When the acceptance letter arrived in the mail, I remember holding it to my chest and sobbing with pure relief. It was a guarantee of a bright, secure future. It was my way out. But Monica could not stand it. She could not stand that the spotlight was off her for even a single second. Monica marched into my high school principal's office and confidently spun a massive, elaborate lie. She claimed she had seen me paying a college student to write my admission essays. She fabricated text messages, faked a detailed timeline, and put on a spectacular, tearful performance about how guilty she felt exposing her own sister, but she just had to do the right thing. It was a total, malicious fabrication. But here is the most devastating part. When the school administration called my parents in for a meeting, my mother, Gloria, did not defend me. She sat in that stiff leather chair, looked the principal in the eye, and nodded. "Diana has always been a corner cutter," my mother said smoothly. "I am deeply disappointed, but I cannot say I am surprised." My father, as always, just stared at the floor and remained silent. The scholarship was instantly revoked. My dreams collapsed overnight. I was forced to take out massive student loans, attend a local community college, and work 2 grueling minimum wage jobs just to survive. That debt chained me to poverty for the next 15 years. And Monica? For her high school graduation 3 years later, my parents bought her a brand new, cherry red convertible. She earned it with her honesty and hard work, my mother boasted to the neighbors. I never confronted them. I just quietly packed my bags, moved into a cheap apartment, and tried to build a life from the wreckage. I carried that heavy resentment silently for years, burying it deep down because, despite everything, I still desperately wanted Felix to know his grandparents. I wanted him to have cousins. I thought I could absorb the poison so he would not have to. I was a fool. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when the mail arrived. Among the usual stack of past due utility bills and supermarket flyers was a thick, heavy envelope with expensive gold foil lining. I opened it at the kitchen counter, my heart sinking as I read the elegant cursive font. It was an invitation to a birthday party for Monica's daughter. It was to be held at my parents' massive suburban backyard that upcoming Saturday. Just looking at the card made my stomach twist into painful knots. Every single family gathering was a psychological minefield. My mother's constant, biting comparisons. My father's total indifference. Monica's triumphant, arrogant smirks. I immediately tossed the invitation toward the trash can, intending to throw it away and invent an excuse about working overtime. But before the thick paper could slip into the bin, Felix walked into the kitchen. He saw the brightly colored card and his eyes lit up instantly. "Is that for the party, Mom?" he asked, his voice vibrating with excitement. He had been talking about seeing his cousins all month. "Can I bring my baseball cards? I want to show them my new rookie card. They are going to think it is so awesome." He clutched his blue binder to his chest, practically bouncing on his toes. I stood there, paralyzed by the sheer hope radiating from his small face. How could I say no? How could I explain to a 9-year-old boy that his own family viewed us as nothing more than targets for their cruelty? He did not understand the deep-rooted malice. He just wanted to belong. He just wanted to play tag in the grass and share his treasures. "Are you sure you want to bring the cards, Felix?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "There will be a lot of kids there. Things might get lost." He shook his head vigorously. "I will be super careful, Mom. I promise. I will keep them in my backpack the whole time." I forced a tight, unconvincing smile and nodded. "Okay, sweetie. We can go." As he ran back to his room cheering, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text message from Monica. I stared at the screen, the harsh glare illuminating the dark kitchen. The text read, "You better bring the boy on Saturday. We have a very special surprise planned. Do not miss it." There was no friendly emoji, no warmth. Just cold, calculated words that read more like a threat than a welcome. I remembered overhearing a phone call between Monica and her best friend, Ramona, a few weeks prior. They were giggling, their voices hushed and conspiratorial. "It will be unforgettable," Monica had said. A heavy, dark knot of dread settled deep in my stomach, pulling tight. Every instinct I possessed as a mother was screaming at me to lock the door, pull the blinds, and keep Felix as far away from that suburban neighborhood as possible. But the guilt of isolating my son from his only extended family held me hostage. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was an adult, and I could handle a few passive-aggressive comments for one afternoon. I convinced myself that I could act as a human shield, taking whatever verbal abuse they threw my way so Felix could have a normal, happy day. It was the worst miscalculation of my entire life. Saturday morning arrived with a bright, mocking sunshine that completely contradicted the dark storm brewing in my chest. I spent an hour trying to make myself look presentable, pulling on a simple floral dress that I had bought on clearance 3 years ago. I wanted to look respectable, not that it ever mattered. In my mother's eyes, anything I wore would look cheap. Felix, on the other hand, was a ball of pure, unadulterated energy. He had laid out his clothes the night before, making sure his favorite t-shirt was completely wrinkle-free. He carefully zipped his heavy blue binder into his faded gray backpack, adjusting the straps so it sat securely against his small back. The drive from our tiny city apartment to my parents' house took exactly 45 minutes. As we navigated through the heavy city traffic and merged onto the highway, I watched the scenery change. The cracked pavements, towering apartment buildings, and noisy streets slowly gave way to wide, smooth roads lined with towering oak trees and perfectly manicured green lawns. We were crossing an invisible boundary into a world where I had never truly belonged. Felix chattered nonstop from the passenger seat. "Do you think they will want to trade cards, Mom? I brought some of my duplicates just in case. I have 3 extra picture cards." His innocence was heartbreaking. I kept both hands gripped tightly on the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. "Maybe, honey," I replied, trying to keep my voice light and steady. "Just remember what we talked about. Keep your backpack close to you, okay? Do not leave it lying around on the grass." "I know, Mom," he said, rolling his eyes in that exaggerated way 9-year-olds do. "It is my treasure. I will protect it." He patted the backpack resting on his lap. The closer we got to the massive, 2-story house, the harder it became for me to breathe. I rehearsed every possible conversation in my head, building mental armor against the inevitable slights and insults. I reminded myself that I was doing this for Felix. I just needed to smile, drink a glass of cheap water, stay out of the way, and leave after 2 hours. 2 hours. That was the maximum amount of time I could hold my breath underwater. I pulled up to the curb, parking directly behind Monica's gleaming luxury SUV. I took one last, deep breath, unbuckled my seatbelt, and turned to my son. "Ready?" I asked. He beamed a brilliant, missing-tooth smile. "Ready," he cheered. The moment we walked through the tall wooden gates into my parents' sprawling backyard, the oppressive atmosphere hit me like a physical wall. The garden was decorated with expensive pastel balloons, a massive catered buffet table, and a towering, custom-made cake that likely cost more than my monthly rent. Classical music played softly from hidden outdoor speakers. It was less of a child's birthday party and more of a networking event for the neighborhood elite. My mother, Gloria, was holding court near the patio doors, holding a crystal glass of chilled white wine. She was wearing a tailored silk blouse, her hair perfectly styled. The moment she spotted us, her practiced, radiant smile faltered for a fraction of a second before hardening into a tight line. "Diana," she said loudly, making sure the nearby guests could hear. "You finally made it. I was beginning to think your old car had broken down on the highway again." A few well-dressed women chuckled politely. I swallowed my pride, stepping forward to offer a polite greeting. Before I could speak, she looked down at Felix. He proudly held out the small, carefully wrapped present we had bought, a modest set of drawing pencils. Gloria took the gift with 2 fingers, inspecting the cheap wrapping paper as if it were contaminated. "How practical," she murmured dismissively, tossing it onto a towering pile of extravagant gifts that included giant plush toys and expensive electronics. Felix's smile dimmed slightly, but he quickly recovered, adjusting his heavy backpack. My father, Walter, was standing by the massive stainless steel grill. I caught his eye for a brief moment. He gave me a curt, robotic nod, then immediately turned his attention back to flipping burgers, making it crystal clear that he had no intention of speaking to me. Then, the patio door slid open and Monica stepped out. She looked like she had just stepped off a magazine cover, draped in expensive designer clothes, her makeup flawless. Right beside her was Ramona, her lifelong best friend and loyal shadow. Ramona was already holding her expensive smartphone, tapping the screen with manicured fingernails. Monica's eyes swept over the yard and immediately locked onto us. She sauntered over, her hips swaying confidently, a predatory smirk playing on her lips. "Well, well. Look who dragged themselves out of the city," Monica sneered, stopping just inches from me. She looked me up and down, her eyes full of raw contempt. Then, she looked at Felix. She stared at his worn-out sneakers and the faded gray backpack clinging to his shoulders. "Still carrying that heavy junk around, Felix?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "You really should throw that garbage away. It makes you look like a little street beggar." My blood instantly boiled. I stepped directly in front of Felix, shielding him from her gaze. "Leave him alone, Monica," I said, my voice low and dangerously tight. Monica just laughed, a high, tinkling sound that sent shivers down my spine. Ramona giggled beside her, raising her phone slightly. "Oh, relax, Diana. I am just giving the kids some fashion advice," Monica said, waving a hand dismissively. She leaned closer to me, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "Besides, the fun is just getting started." The afternoon dragged on, the tension in the air growing thicker and more suffocating with every passing minute. I tried to stick by Felix's side like glue, but the social dynamics of the party were designed to separate us. The children, about 15 of them, were running wild across the massive lawn, playing aggressive games of tag and throwing water balloons. Felix hovered at the edge of the group, his backpack securely strapped to his chest, trying to find an opening to join in. I was standing near the edge of the patio, watching him closely, when my mother suddenly appeared at my elbow. "Diana, come here immediately," Gloria commanded, grabbing my forearm with a surprisingly tight grip. "Aunt Susan is asking about your little accounting job. Come say hello." I tried to pull away. "In a minute, Mom. I am watching Felix." But Gloria yanked my arm harder, physically pulling me toward a group of elderly relatives sitting under a large umbrella. "Do not be so neurotic," she hissed under her breath. "He is 9 years old. Let the boy play. You are suffocating him." Trapped in a corner by a barrage of mundane questions from distant relatives, my line of sight to Felix was partially blocked. I kept craning my neck, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. From across the yard, I saw Monica's son, a large, aggressive 10-year-old, shove Felix hard in the shoulder. Felix stumbled backward but stayed on his feet, forcing a nervous smile, trying to pretend it was just a rough game. The other kids, taking the cue from the oldest cousin, began circling Felix. I saw Monica leaning casually against a decorative stone pillar, a glass of wine in her hand. She was watching the children intently. She leaned her head toward Ramona and whispered something. Ramona's face lit up with a cruel, malicious grin. Ramona held her phone up, the camera lens pointed directly at the group of children. The kids began taunting Felix. I could not hear the exact words over the loud music, but I could see their mocking faces. One girl pointed at his shoes and laughed. The older boy shoved him again, harder this time. Felix looked around frantically, his eyes darting through the crowd, searching for me. But a tall uncle stepped in front of my line of sight, blocking me entirely. When I shifted to the side to see again, the group of children was moving. They were actively hurting Felix, pushing and shoving him away from the open lawn and toward a large, dimly lit canvas play tent set up at the far end of the garden, hidden behind a row of thick hedges. Panic exploded in my chest, hot and blinding. I did not care about being polite anymore. I shoved past Aunt Susan, spilling half of her drink, and ignored my mother's loud gasp of indignation. I broke into a run across the perfectly manicured grass, my cheap heels sinking into the dirt. Monica saw me coming. Her smirk widened, and she took a slow, deliberate sip of her wine. The kids had completely disappeared inside the tent. And then a sound pierced the air that froze the blood in my veins. If you are enjoying this story so far, please take a quick second to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment down below telling us what city you are watching from. Every single comment helps push this video to more people, and we truly appreciate our Reddit drama family. It was a sharp, strangled sob. It was not the sound of a child who had scraped a knee or lost a game of tag. It was a sound of absolute terror and profound heartbreak. The noise sliced through the loud classical music and the mindless chatter of the party guests, anchoring me to a terrifying reality. I sprinted the last few yards to the canvas play tent, my lungs burning, the world around me blurring into irrelevance. I grabbed the heavy fabric of the tent flap and violently ripped it open, tearing the Velcro seam apart. The dim light filtering through the canvas revealed a scene that will be burned into my retinas until the day I die. Felix was curled into a tight, trembling ball on the rough ground. He was pressing himself desperately against the furthest corner of the tent. His bright, favorite t-shirt was smeared with dark mud and thick pink cake frosting. But that was not what made my knees buckle. His small face was swollen, and a dark, angry purple bruise was rapidly blooming across his left cheekbone. A thin trail of bright red blood trickled slowly from the corner of his split lip, staining his chin. He was hyperventilating, his chest heaving with choked, silent sobs. Surrounding him, scattered across the dirt like fallen autumn leaves, were hundreds of tiny, shredded pieces of cardboard. They had unzipped his backpack. They had taken his blue binder. They had pulled out every single baseball card, including the rare rookie card he had bought with $25 of saved pennies, and they had ripped them into absolute shreds. His sanctuary, his joy, his entire world, destroyed in a matter of minutes for their entertainment. "Felix," I screamed, a raw, animalistic sound tearing from my throat. I dropped to my knees, not caring that the mud soaked through my dress, and gathered his shaking body into my arms. He felt so small, so fragile, vibrating with pure shock. I cradled his bruised face, my hands trembling violently as I wiped the blood from his lip. "Oh my God, sweetheart, what did they do to you? Who did this?" Felix clung to my shirt with a grip so tight it hurt. His eyes, wide and swimming with tears, looked up at me with a fear that shattered my heart into a million pieces. "Mom, please," he whimpered, his voice barely a cracked whisper. "Please do not say anything. Do not yell at them. I am scared they will hate me even more." The psychological weight of those words hit me with the force of a freight train. My beautiful, sweet 9-year-old son was sitting in the dirt, bleeding and surrounded by the ruined shreds of his only treasure, and his biggest fear was that his abusers would not like him. He had internalized the toxic hierarchy of this family so deeply that he believed he deserved this punishment. He believed that if he just stayed quiet and took the beating, he might eventually earn their love. The sheer tragedy of his broken spirit ignited a fire deep inside my chest, a fire that instantly burned away 19 years of fear, submission, and silence. I kissed his forehead, pulling him tight against my chest. "You listen to me, Felix," I whispered fiercely, my voice vibrating with a new, dangerous calm. "You did nothing wrong. You never have to earn their love. They do not deserve you." I carefully helped him to his feet. I picked up his empty, dirt-stained backpack and draped it over my shoulder. Keeping one arm wrapped protectively around his shoulders, I guided him out of the suffocating darkness of the tent and back out into the bright, blinding sunlight of the affluent suburban backyard. I was no longer the invisible daughter. I was no longer the broke, tired accountant who kept her head down to avoid conflict. I was a mother, and I was going to burn this entire toxic empire to the ground. The transition from the dim, suffocating heat of the canvas tent to the bright, breezy atmosphere of the suburban backyard was completely jarring. It felt like stepping out of a nightmare directly into a terrible, twisted comedy. The classical music was still drifting from the hidden speakers. The distant relatives were still laughing over their crystal glasses of chilled white wine. My father was still mindlessly flipping the burgers on the stainless steel grill. Nobody had noticed the horrific violence that had just taken place mere yards away from their polite conversations. I kept one arm wrapped tightly around my son's trembling shoulders, guiding him forward across the manicured grass. His face was buried against my side, trying to hide his swollen, bleeding cheek from the world. Waiting for us right outside the hedge, standing like a pair of predatory birds, were my sister Monica and her shadow Ramona. Monica was casually leaning against a stone birdbath, holding her half-empty glass of wine. She looked perfectly relaxed, utterly devoid of any guilt or empathy. Ramona was standing right beside her, holding her expensive smartphone up at eye level. The small, glowing red dot on the screen indicated that she was recording every single second of our misery. Monica took a slow, deliberate sip of her wine, her eyes sweeping over Felix's ruined clothes and his bruised face. Instead of showing an ounce of concern, a slow, dark smirk curled the corners of her perfectly painted lips. She looked at me, her eyes dancing with a cruel, victorious amusement. "Oh, do not be so dramatic, Diana," Monica sneered, her voice carrying a sickeningly sweet tone that dripped with pure venom. She gestured lazily toward my weeping 9-year-old son with her manicured hand. "Kids play rough. He just needs to toughen up." Time completely stopped. The classical music faded into a low, buzzing static in my ears. The world narrowed down to the arrogant, mocking face of the sister who had systematically destroyed my youth, and who was now actively trying to destroy the only beautiful thing I had left in my life. Something inside my chest, a heavy iron chain of submission and fear that I had carried for 19 long years, finally snapped. It did not break quietly, it shattered with an explosive, blinding force. I did not think. I did not weigh the consequences. I let go of Felix's shoulder for exactly 1 second. I closed the distance between us in a single, lightning-fast stride. I planted my feet firmly on the soft grass, pulled my arm back, and swung my hand with every single ounce of rage, grief, and exhaustion I possessed. The slap echoed across the massive backyard like a gunshot. It was a sharp, cracking sound of flesh hitting flesh that instantly silenced the entire party. Monica's head snapped violently to the side. The crystal wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering into dozens of glittering pieces against the stone base of the birdbath, splashing pale liquid over her expensive designer shoes. A collective, horrified gasp rippled through the crowd of well-dressed guests. The fork stopped clinking against porcelain plates. The polite laughter died instantly in their throats. Everyone froze, their eyes locked on us in absolute, stunned disbelief. Monica stumbled backward, her hand flying up to her rapidly reddening cheek. For the first time in her entire pampered, entitled life, the smug look of superiority was completely wiped from her face. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of pure shock and sudden, primal fear. She looked at me not as her pathetic, invisible older sister, but as a dangerous stranger she did not recognize. "Do not you ever," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper that cut through the dead silence of the yard, "ever look at my son again." My whole body was vibrating with adrenaline, but my mind was terrifyingly clear. I had crossed a line, a massive, uncrossable boundary in our family dynamic, and I felt absolutely no regret. I only wished I had done it a decade earlier. Ramona had lowered her phone slightly, her mouth hanging open in shock, the red recording light still blinking steadily against the afternoon sun. I turned my burning gaze toward her, my fists still clenched tightly at my sides, ready to tear the device from her hands if she dared to speak. But she took a quick, frightened step backward, hiding the phone against her chest. I had finally stopped running. I had finally stopped absorbing their poison. The invisible daughter was dead, and the woman standing in her place was ready for war. The heavy silence was shattered by the frantic, clicking sound of my mother's expensive heels charging across the stone patio. Gloria pushed her way through the frozen crowd of relatives, her face contorted into an ugly mask of absolute fury. She did not look at her bleeding, sobbing 9-year-old grandson. She did not look at the torn shreds of his beloved baseball cards scattered across the dirt. Her eyes were locked entirely on Monica, who was now dramatically sobbing, holding her red, stinging cheek as if she had been mortally wounded. "Diana, have you completely lost your mind?" Gloria shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. She stepped protectively in front of Monica, glaring at me with a hatred so pure it physically radiated from her. "You come into my home, you ruin your niece's birthday, and you physically assault your own sister? You are an animal." I did not flinch. I stood completely still, my breathing slow and measured. "Look at my son, Mother," I commanded, pointing a shaking finger toward Felix, who was pressing himself against my leg, terrified of the yelling. "Look at what her children did to him," while she stood by and laughed. Gloria barely spared Felix a glance. She waved her hand dismissively, her upper lip curling into a sneer of absolute disgust. It is just a scratch. Boys fight. But this, she gestured wildly toward Monica, this is unforgivable. You have always been jealous of her. You have always been a bitter, resentful failure. I should never have allowed you to bring that worthless bastard child into my home. The word hung in the air, toxic and heavy. My father, Walter, was standing by the grill, the spatula still in his hand. He looked at me, his eyes blank and cowardly, and then he simply turned his back, focusing on the smoking meat. That was the final confirmation I needed. There was nothing left to save here. There was no family to repair. I did not scream back. I did not cry. The panic and sadness had completely evaporated, leaving behind a cold, calculating determination. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. What are you doing? Gloria snapped, her eyes narrowing as I raised the camera. I am gathering evidence, I stated flatly. I ignored her shouting and turned to Felix. I knelt down gently, speaking to him in a soft, steady voice. Hold still, sweetie. I just need to take a few pictures. I snapped high-resolution photos of his bruised, swollen cheek, the cut on his lip, and his mud-stained clothes. Then I walked past my screaming mother and marched straight into the canvas tent. I took wide-angle shots of the shredded baseball cards scattered across the dirt floor, making sure to capture the absolute destruction of his property. When I emerged from the tent, I walked straight up to Ramona, who was still clutching her phone like a shield. I looked her dead in the eye, my voice devoid of any emotion. If you delete that video, I will have my lawyer subpoena your cloud storage. You just filmed a group of children assaulting a minor while an adult encouraged it. You are an accessory. Ramona swallowed hard, her face draining of color. I turned my back on all of them. I took Felix's hand, holding it firmly but gently. Let us go home, I said. We walked across the manicured lawn, our heads held high, leaving the ruins of my toxic family behind us. As we reached the car, I could still hear my mother screaming threats into the wind, but the sound was already fading, becoming nothing more than meaningless noise in the distance. The drive back to the city was silent, save for the soft, rhythmic sound of Felix's breathing. He had fallen asleep in the passenger seat, completely exhausted by the adrenaline and the trauma. His head was resting against the window, his bruised cheek looking even darker and more painful under the fading afternoon light. I kept my eyes fixed on the highway, my mind racing through a million different logistical steps. I was not going to cry in my bedroom tonight. I was going to dismantle their lives piece by piece. Instead of driving to our apartment, I took the exit toward the city's urgent care clinic. I needed an official, objective medical record of his injuries. The clinic was a stark contrast to the luxurious backyard we had just escaped. It was brightly lit with harsh fluorescent bulbs, smelling strongly of antiseptic and stale coffee. We waited for an hour on uncomfortable plastic chairs. When the doctor finally called us in, she was incredibly gentle. She carefully examined Felix's split lip and the swelling around his eye. It is a mild contusion, the doctor explained softly, noting the details on her digital tablet. No signs of concussion, thankfully. Keep ice on it for the next 24 hours to reduce the swelling. I need you to document everything clearly in his medical chart, I requested, my voice firm and professional. Include the scratches, the bruising, and the torn clothing. I am filing a police report and pursuing a civil case for assault. The doctor paused, looking at my fierce expression, and nodded in quiet understanding. I will make sure the descriptions are extremely detailed, she promised. While Felix was resting on the examination table with a small ice pack pressed to his face, I stepped out into the quiet hallway and dialed a number I had saved in my phone months ago, but never had the courage to call. It was Ms. Adler, a highly recommended family law attorney known for being absolutely ruthless in court. I had originally found her number when I considered fighting for more child support from Derek, but I had always been too afraid of the legal fees to make the call. That fear was gone now. She answered on the third ring. Adler Law, this is Ms. Adler. My name is Diana, I said, leaning my forehead against the cool, painted cinder block wall of the clinic. My 9-year-old son was physically assaulted today by a group of older children. The incident was orchestrated and encouraged by my adult sister, who also allowed her friend to film the entire attack for entertainment. Her children destroyed my son's personal property. I have extensive photographic evidence of the injuries, the ruined property, and the location. I want to file a restraining order, and I want to sue them for assault, property damage, and severe emotional distress. I do not care how much it costs or how long it takes. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint clicking of a keyboard. Do you have the contact information of the person who filmed the incident? Ms. Adler asked, her tone shifting instantly into a sharp, businesslike focus. Yes, I replied. Her name is Ramona. I warned her not to delete the footage. Good, Ms. Adler said. Send me the photographs immediately. I will start drafting the preservation letters tonight to ensure that video is not destroyed. Bring your son's medical records to my office on Monday morning. We are going to hold them completely accountable. I hung up the phone and took a deep, shaky breath. The legal wheels were finally in motion. I walked back into the examination room, looking at my brave little boy holding the ice pack to his cheek. I was his mother, his protector, and his shield. They had picked a fight with the wrong woman. The next 3 days were a blur of legal paperwork, sworn affidavits, and quiet evenings spent reading comic books to Felix on the living room sofa. I had blocked the phone numbers of every single member of my family. My phone was blissfully quiet, devoid of my mother's toxic texts or my sister's passive-aggressive insults. But the silence broke abruptly on Thursday afternoon while I was sitting at my desk during my lunch break. My phone vibrated violently, displaying the name of my good friend, Clara. I picked it up, expecting her to ask about our weekend plans. Diana, are you sitting down? Clara asked, her voice breathless and frantic. You need to log onto the internet right now. Check the local community groups. Check everything. Clara, what are you talking about? I am at work, I said, feeling a sudden spike of anxiety. The video, Diana, Clara insisted, her tone urgent. The video from the birthday party. It is everywhere. My blood ran cold. I quickly opened my web browser and navigated to the massive, highly active neighborhood social media group for my parents' affluent suburb. Right there, pinned to the top of the discussion board with thousands of angry comments, was the footage. Later, I would find out exactly how it happened. Cousin Beatrice, a quiet, observant relative who had attended the party, had seen Ramona upload the cruel video to a private, restricted close friends story on her social media account. Disgusted by the horrific display of bullying and Monica's arrogant laughter, Beatrice had used a screen recording app to capture the entire video before Ramona could delete it. Beatrice then anonymously emailed the file to the administrators of several massive local community boards, exposing the reality behind Monica's perfect suburban facade. I clicked play, my stomach churning. The video was high quality. It clearly showed Felix crying in the dirt, surrounded by his torn baseball cards. It clearly captured Monica sipping her wine, smirking, and saying, "He just needs to toughen up." It clearly showed my mother, Gloria, laughing in the background, completely ignoring her grandson's pain. And then, it showed the satisfying, explosive moment my hand connected with Monica's jaw. The internet did not take Monica's side. The comment section was a massive, rolling wave of absolute fury. People were disgusted by the adults allowing a child to be tormented. They identified Monica immediately. Within 48 hours, the digital justice was absolute and merciless. Monica was a high-end real estate agent whose entire career relied on her polished, trustworthy public image. By Friday morning, her brokerage firm released a public statement severing all ties with her, citing a zero-tolerance policy for bullying and abuse. 3 of her wealthiest clients pulled their multi-million-dollar listings from her portfolio. Her husband, embarrassed by the overwhelming public backlash, reportedly moved into a hotel. Monica's perfect, carefully constructed empire collapsed into dust, destroyed by the very same tool she had tried to use to humiliate my son. The karmic justice was swift and poetic. She had wanted an audience for her cruelty, and the universe had given her exactly that. She was a local pariah, unable to even walk into the neighborhood grocery store without being pointed at and whispered about. I sat at my desk, watching the view count on the video climb higher and higher. I felt no pity. I felt no remorse. I felt only a cold, profound sense of validation. For 19 years, they had controlled the narrative, painting me as the unstable, jealous failure. Now, the entire world could see exactly who the real monsters were. Saturday morning, exactly 1 week after the disastrous birthday party, a sharp, frantic knocking echoed through my small apartment. I looked through the peephole and felt a cold knot tighten in my chest. It was my mother, Gloria. She looked completely unrecognizable. Her usually immaculate hair was messy, the dark circles under her eyes were prominent, and she was wearing a wrinkled trench coat. She was holding a large, expensive-looking gift box wrapped in silver ribbon. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door just a few inches, leaving the heavy security chain firmly attached. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice flat and devoid of any warmth. Gloria let out a ragged sob, pressing her hands against the doorframe. "Diana, please," she begged, her voice trembling with a desperation I had never heard before. "Please, you have to let me in. We need to talk about this. You have to call off your lawyer." "There is absolutely nothing to talk about," I replied, staring at her panicked face. "You're destroying your sister's life," Gloria cried, tears spilling over her cheeks, ruining her expensive mascara. "She lost her job. Her husband is talking about a separation. The neighbors are leaving hateful notes in our mailbox. Please, Diana, I am begging you. Drop the lawsuit. Tell the public it was just a misunderstanding. I brought a gift for Felix. A brand new gaming console. Just please, give your sister a way to survive this." I looked at the shiny silver box in her hands, feeling a wave of absolute disgust wash over me. She still did not understand. She still thought money could erase trauma. She still thought Monica was the victim. "You are not here because you are sorry," I said, my voice steady and painfully clear. "You are not here because you care that your grandson was bleeding in the dirt. You are here because you got caught. You are here because the entire world finally sees the ugly, toxic reality of who you and Monica truly are." Gloria's face twisted in panic. "Diana, she is your family. You cannot do this to your own blood." "Family?" I scoffed, a bitter, hollow sound. Family does not tear up a 9-year-old boy's treasures and laugh at his tears. Family does not steal a 17-year-old girl's college scholarship out of pure spite. You made your choice 19 years ago, Mother. And you made it again last Saturday. Monica is your daughter. Felix is mine. And I will protect my son against anyone, including you. I reached forward and pushed the heavy wooden door shut. "Diana. Please," she screamed from the hallway, banging her fists against the wood. I calmly slid the deadbolt into place, the loud, metallic click echoing through the quiet apartment. I walked away from the door, leaving her crying in the hallway. I walked into the living room, where Felix was sitting on the floor, watching cartoons. He looked up at me, his bruised cheek fading into a dull yellow. "Is everything okay, Mom?" he asked. I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes for the first time in years. "Everything is perfectly fine, sweetie," I said, sitting down next to him on the rug. "Everything is finally going to be okay." The legal battle moved swiftly, fueled by the undeniable video evidence and the meticulous medical records we had gathered. Ms. Adler was a force of nature in the courtroom. Within a month, the judge granted a strict, comprehensive restraining order against both Monica and Gloria, legally forbidding them from coming within 500 feet of Felix or me. We also won a substantial civil settlement for the property damage and emotional distress. The money was placed directly into a secure college fund for Felix, ensuring that his educational future would never be stolen the way mine had been. But winning a lawsuit does not instantly erase the psychological damage of abuse. The real work, the hardest battle, happened inside the quiet, calming walls of Dr. Hayes's office. I enrolled Felix in weekly child therapy sessions to help him process the trauma of the party. At first, he was completely mute. He would sit in the comfortable armchair, staring at his shoes, terrified that saying the wrong thing would cause more trouble. He had internalized the belief that his pain was a burden to others. Dr. Hayes was incredibly patient. She used art therapy, giving him colored pencils and large sheets of paper, allowing him to draw the scary feelings he could not vocalize. Over weeks of gentle guidance, the invisible walls around Felix's heart began to slowly crack open. He finally spoke about the deep fear he felt in that dark tent. He cried, mourning the loss of his cards, but more importantly, mourning the loss of the family he thought he had. I sat beside him in every session, holding his hand, reinforcing the truth that he was safe, loved, and entirely worthy of respect. Surprisingly, the healing process brought an unexpected ally into our lives. My ex-husband, Derek, saw the viral video online from his apartment in Seattle. The shock of seeing his son treated with such cruelty snapped him out of his distant, detached post-divorce routine. He flew out to Minnesota for a week to attend the court hearings, sitting right beside me in the gallery. After he returned to the West Coast, the dynamic changed completely. Derek started calling Felix every single evening without fail. They did not talk about the lawsuit or the bullying. They talked strictly about baseball. Derek bought a premium sports streaming package, and they would watch the games at the same time, miles apart, discussing pitching strategies and batting averages over the phone. I would listen from the kitchen, hearing Felix's animated voice ringing through the apartment, the old spark of joy finally flickering back to life. Derek was stepping up, repairing the fractured father-son bond that Felix desperately needed. Our friends also formed a protective wall around us. Miles and Clara, the couple who had called me about the video leak, became our surrogate family. They came over every Sunday evening, bringing massive trays of homemade lasagna and fresh garlic bread. Miles, who had played college baseball, took Felix out to the local batting cages, patiently teaching him how to adjust his swing and hit the fastballs. Our small, cramped apartment, which had once felt like a lonely fortress, was suddenly filled with loud laughter, the smell of good food, and the warmth of genuine belonging. One crisp Saturday morning, 2 months after the party, I took Felix back to the dusty local card shop downtown. He walked down the narrow aisles, his eyes scanning the glass cases. I handed him a crisp $20 bill. He carefully selected a new, sealed pack of premium baseball cards. As we walked out of the store, he did not. It was a beautiful, golden afternoon in late spring. The sun was hanging low in the sky, casting long, warm shadows across the vibrant green grass of the community baseball diamond. The air smelled of freshly cut grass, hot dogs, and dusty clay. Felix was standing exactly where he belonged, right in the middle of the field, playing shortstop for his local junior league team. He was wearing his crisp white and blue uniform, his baseball cap pulled low over his eyes to block the glare of the sun. He looked taller, stronger, and incredibly confident. He was no longer the frightened little boy shrinking away in a dark tent. He was an athlete, focused, alert, and entirely fearless. I was sitting in the middle of the aluminum bleachers, surrounded by the people who actually mattered. Derek had flown in for the weekend just to watch the championship game, sitting on my left, nervously gripping a paper coffee cup. On my right were Clara and Miles, cheering loudly every time a player stepped up to the home plate. The opposing batter swung hard, sending a sharp, incredibly fast line drive soaring straight toward the gap between second and third base. It looked like an impossible catch. But Felix did not hesitate. He sprinted to his right, his cleats kicking up a cloud of brown dust, and threw his body horizontally into the air. He stretched his leather glove out to the absolute limit, snatching the speeding baseball right out of the sky before hitting the dirt and rolling safely to his feet. Out, the umpire roared, pumping his fist into the air. The crowd in the bleachers erupted into massive cheers. Derek jumped to his feet, shouting Felix's name, his face beaming with absolute pride. Clara and Miles were clapping so hard their hands were turning red. I sat there, my heart swelling until I thought it might burst through my chest. Felix dusted off his uniform, looked up toward our section of the bleachers, and flashed a brilliant, missing-tooth smile. He raised his glove high in the air, acknowledging our cheers. Looking at my son, bathed in the golden afternoon light, surrounded by the loud, unconditional support of his father and our closest friends, I finally understood the most important lesson of my entire life. Blood does not automatically make you family. Genetics do not guarantee love, loyalty, or safety. True family is not defined by who shares your last name or who bought you a cheap birthday gift. True family is defined by the people who stand beside you when you are bleeding in the dirt. It is the people who help you gather your torn pieces and patiently teach you how to put them back together. We had lost the family we were born into, but in the wreckage, we had built something infinitely stronger, purer, and far more beautiful. We had built a family of choice. And as I waved back to my smiling son, I knew, with absolute certainty, that we had already won the biggest game of our lives. Am I wrong for refusing to forgive my mother and sister, even after they lost everything, or should I let the past go for the sake of family? Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and ring the bell so you never miss a story from our Reddit drama family.